Good evening and welcome to Normal Island on our new Thursday evening schedule. I'm Cog and I will be hosting for this evening. Tonight we'll be looking at why Americans hate their private healthcare companies and more specifically their private insurance companies, how Reform are trying to mislead you on foreign criminals, and a potential pact between Reform and the Tories. I'll be joined throughout the night by the brilliant Samuel Kay. Some of you will be familiar with Samuel from his videos and social media content. We used to collaborate a bit back in the day. How you doing, Samuel? All right?
I'm doing okay. How are you doing?
Yeah, it could be better. I'm like recovering from this cold thing that's been going around. I
Right.
think it's just been taken out everybody. Have you had it yet?
I haven't had it yet, but I mean the weather in terms of it just being really dark very soon is like kind of taking its toll on me as well. So that's a bit that's not
Yes.
great.
What's it called?
Is it,
There's a term for that.
is it seasonal? Some
Seasonal
like
affective disorder. SAD.
that's
That's it.
that's
Yeah,
that's it.
yeah.
That's the one. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. No, I get it majorly too. I've got like this alarm clock thing that like lights up the room in the morning very slowly. I need to start using it because it's like well past time. I should start
Yeah.
using it. Yeah,
I've heard
they're
of
really
that as well, by the way.
yeah,
Might invest in
they're
that
really
next
good.
year.
Yeah, definitely get one of them. Anyway, so don't forget to like and share this stream. It helps us massively and allows us to keep the show going. Samuel and I will be reading through your comments after the second story, so do keep commenting your thoughts as we go through the stories. All right, on to our first story of the night. What are the things that private healthcare defenders can never own up to? What can they never acknowledge? It has to be the amount of suffering that they cause, right? In their pursuit of profit. Since the assassination of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, the US medical system has come under extensive scrutiny for its cruel exploitation of people at the most vulnerable points in their lives. Stories have been pouring out about the horrors that they have faced at the hands of faceless, unaccountable answering machines when they've been denied medical care. BuzzFeed News compiled some of those stories into a collection, and it makes for some dystopian reading for those of us who have healthcare that is entirely covered by our taxes. An $8,600 ambulance charge was denied because the ambulance was out of network. I guess when you're having a life threatening emergency, you should call your insurance company to make sure the ambulance is in network. Another user said, my husband had to have hernia surgery. He went through the steps and even had pre approval for the insurance company because we had no money to cover this. Then we received a bill for the entire procedure and a notice the claim was denied. He called and was told to resubmit. The person on the phone said that it was a usual practice to deny every third or fourth claim. Isn't that insane? Every third or fourth claim denied for no reason. And the company kept the money. He was able to resubmit and get this done. Imagine being too sick or unable to do this. The second claim was paid in full. They're just interested in big profits. And then, in a heartbreaking case, I think this is heartbreaking, an oncology worker wrote, when my sister had breast cancer, it eventually metastasized to her brain. Her doctor recommended gamma knife surgery, which at the time was still a little known, but was still a little new, excuse me, but an accepted treatment. The insurance sticked around for months until her doctor was finally successful in getting approved. After the procedure, they did another MRI. All the lesions that were identified in the previous MRI were gone, but in the time it took for the insurance to agree to cover it, new ones had appeared. That's when I knew it was over for her. She died less than 3 months later. It's been 20 years now, and my mum still won't tell me who her insurer was, as I would still rip them a new one. I work in oncology, and I know that brain cancer / Mets are a death sentence among almost all the time. But she still could have had a bit longer if they weren't such fuckers. This bit really broke my heart. Her reaction to learning the news when it was time for hospice still breaks my heart. I thought I had more time. She was only 43. She should have had more. It is really hard to overemphasize the burning anger that Americans correctly feel towards their healthcare system and like the tragic, heartbreaking stories it creates. The insurance companies, like, more particularly are responsible for this, and they get a lot of the brunt of the hatred since they're the ones that the Americans are like looking at. They're the point of first contact, or rather the point of no contact, because of course they're met with people who have very little power to actually take action themselves. Decisions are made higher up, and you can never hold those people accountable. These are horrific stories, but what's the logic behind them? Why does this system persist under the weight of its increasingly obvious contradictions? Well, a common assumption is that if they move to an NHS style system, they would just pay the same amount in taxes anyway. But of course, this isn't correct. For one thing, our healthcare is cheaper because patients with no money are able to seek preventative care early on, and problems don't linger and become more expensive. If you get cancer treatment early, it's cheap to treat. If you have to wait for chemotherapy, if you have to wait for surgery, it's much harder to treat. And for another, we only pay for another reason, excuse me, we only pay for the healthcare and administration, whereas in the US they're paying for the healthcare, the administration, and the profits of big corporations. They're paying off shareholders, and it'll never be more efficient to be paying off shareholders and paying for the cost of actually delivering the healthcare. According to the King's Fund, the average cost of the NHS of a single ambulance trip is £417, but in the USA, those with insurance can expect to pay anywhere from $250 to $1,000 on top of what their insurance is already paying. Just to emphasize that, that isn't the total cost. That's just the bit that's not covered by your insurance. So that, you're already paying your insurer to cover you, and then you've got to pay $250 to $1,000 on average, right? That's also an average. There are so many stories, like the first story we looked at, the first example we looked at, where people are paying $6,000 for an ambulance. I was following a friend of mine, Dumb Birch Tree, on TikTok. I think that's her name still. But she was saying she's just moved to the US to do a PhD there. And she was saying that she knows people who have fallen out with friends because on a night out, one of the friends has gotten drunk, hurt themselves. Their friends have called an ambulance, and the person who's been hurt has woken up with a $6,000 bill. It's just dystopian, insane to think about. If you want an example, if you want to see an example of these higher costs without noticeable improvements, you can also think of the last time in this country that you visited the dentist, right? Dentists in the UK have been privatized by stealth, and everyone hates it. It's expensive, it's hard to get appointments, and people often can't use the closest ones, which helps to splinter communities. You can't have that relationship with your GP or dentist in a private healthcare system where you have to travel to go to the cheapest ones or the ones that are in network for your insurance. So, Samuel, do you think that America will ever catch up on how much better and more efficient public healthcare actually is, or are they stuck in a bit of a spiral of decline?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's a tragic situation, isn't it, in terms of those stories that you've been reading out. And I've been doing a lot of my research in terms of how many people have been denied healthcare and the harrowing stories of people suffering because essentially this for-profit healthcare system has been turned into a money-making system for a few people at the top, which is exactly what you're alluding to. And I think what's striking to me was, as everyone has seen, the reaction online to this assassination of the CEO of this healthcare company, United Healthcare. And I think an interesting point to note is that United Healthcare has the highest rates of denials in terms of approving people's cases, around 32%. So the average in the industry is around 16%. United Healthcare denies around 32% of its claims, which is an absolute disgrace. So from that, you can already tell that people are suffering. They're not getting the healthcare they need. And I think that there is a bit of a realization in a lot of the United States at the moment that this is a system that cannot continue to go on. Bernie Sanders had the right idea. He had a very vibrant movement back in 2016 and in 2020. And what was it based on? It was based on exactly this: providing healthcare for people, not treating every single thing as a money-making venture in the country, And I think that what you're seeing now is people, whether they're Republican, whether they're Democrat, whether they're centrist, they're all coming to that same realization that healthcare is universal. Everyone is going to need care at some point in their lives. And just very quickly, the point that you made earlier about how in the UK we're actually paying less because people seek preventative measures and preventative care. I think that's such a good point. When a lot of the debate bros on in the US have this idea that, in the UK their system is destroyed. Oh, in Canada you're not going to have the healthcare because you're waiting 10 million years for the appointment. Okay, guess what? I'm not also going to experience medical bankruptcy as a result of having my ankle dislocated and having a trip to the hospital. So these are the kind of things. So yeah, I was really glad that you brought up the preventative healthcare as well, because it also makes a system where people are able to actually not have to pay right up front in something that could have been avoided many years ago.
Yeah. So, interestingly, there was a meta study of 38 studies on Canadian and US healthcare outcomes. Basically, they compiled, I think this was in 2021, they compiled a list of all of the studies and compiled this meta study of 38 studies, specifically looking at Canadian and US healthcare outcomes. And it concluded I'll just quote this. It says, not for profit hospital funding results in appreciably lower payments to third party payers in comparison to for profit hospitals while achieving lower mortality rates. Because, again, it's the same thing. I've got other studies saying that they're suggesting that the situation is the same if you compare it to UK healthcare. In UK healthcare, we experience less post-operative complications. So even this kind of myth of the oh well, they have to pay through the nose for it, but those that can pay,
Yeah.
they experience a much better quality of service. It's not actually entirely true. They're suffering more with like post-operative complications, and 11% of the UK experienced medical slash treatment errors in 2020, compared with 12% in the USA. Just on every metric, it's
Yeah.
insane how much it fails as a system, right?
And it's just very quickly, just to emphasize, this is the power of corporate lobbying, right? There is a reason why this system has been held in place, and I think that maybe this is another reason why we see such a united reaction online. People realize that the intense lobbying that goes on in Washington in terms of keeping this, immoral and unethical system in place is why it's still here. It's not like people have not seen what OECD countries around the world are doing in terms of their healthcare systems. They can see that, but you have the grip of the healthcare insurance industry spending millions, and I think some people in the chat have correctly identified it. It's both parties. When we
Mm.
talk about the Democrats and when we talk about the Republicans are openly in their healthcare insurance companies' pockets, but Democrats would like to think, we can make a public option here, or we can tweak this, and we can expand care for elderly people, which is also great things, better than what the Republicans are offering, but it's not reaching the moment, which is what people want, Medicare for all.
Yeah. I think either Medicare for all or just a universal system, because let's not forget, like, we created the NHS when we had no money. Like, we were in masses of debt to the US, debt that we only paid off in the early 2000s. Like, literally, it took us 50 years to pay off.
Yeah.
And yeah, and we created the NHS then. The idea that you can't afford to create this kind of healthcare system seems ridiculous. It seems like you can't afford not to. I did want to ask you about what you think the danger is now with creeping privatization here in the
Yeah.
UK,
Yeah.
because of course, sort of 10, I think it was about 10 years ago, Nigel Farage was caught on camera saying he would prefer an insurance-based model, and he's never really kind of denied that. He said, "Oh well, we should look at an insurance-based model."
Yeah.
Mate, look at what an insurance-based model means. Talk to some of the people who live under
Yeah.
an insurance-based model of healthcare.
Yeah.
Fuck's sake! But the I think the biggest worry for me, at least, is that Wes Streeting and the Conservatives, the more kind of like the mainstream parties, also have this cross-party consensus that you're talking about here in the UK, right? Where they're like increasingly relying on private provision, even though private provision doesn't provide anything that
Yeah.
the
It
NHS is short of
extracts.
manpower, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You're totally right. I mean, first of all, Wes Streeting cannot be trusted, which I think goes without saying. I think most people understand that he's not an ally of the LGBT community, and he's not an ally of the NHS either.
Mm.
I think there is, the over reliance and the continuing privatization of a service in the NHS is something that we as leftists, as a country, have to watch out for, because we already see the seeds being planted. I think, no joke. I think there was a tweet the other day where Summer was praising his relationship with BlackRock and inviting these people to the table. This is very dangerous stuff. These are companies, US companies, who have high ambitions to creep into our public health systems, creep into our public systems in general, and get a foothold. And once they get that foothold, it's very hard to get private finance out. As you can see with the PFIs and the initiatives with under Blair, these things. I was even going to say might seem good on the surface, but I think in 2024, I think a lot of people are actually like, we don't want privatization. We don't want market influence. And I also this touches on what you were saying. I read a story the other day about, maybe you heard this, Rachel Reeves inviting bankers into the NHS to see where savings could be made. And I just think to myself, wow, 14 years of austerity, cuts to every single part. They'll claim NHS funding, but we know it's dropped. And you have Keir Starmer inviting bankers. And I watched a video about this correctly saying, like what on earth can bankers what insight could bankers offer into this situation? These are people who usually have, preside over huge inflated budgets, right? In terms of in the banking sector, they're not trying to scrimp and save. So what is the wisdom and logic of bringing bankers into to do this? And it's also it's just also a kind of a bit insulting as well. You have nurses, doctors, healthcare professionals who've been working so hard over these last years to keep the NHS running, and you see that ministers are not responsive to their needs. They're just continuing to push the idea of privatization and push the idea of cuts. It's not working.
Yeah, I'm also like, I mean, obviously everybody's fed up of austerity. Everybody's fed up of privatization. Like, yeah, but why don't we make everything great? Like, how the water company, the water companies and the train companies run everything. Why don't we make everything like that? It's like it doesn't kind of work. But I'm also increasingly skeptical of the idea of running everything at maximum efficiency, right?
Right,
Because
exactly.
I think the example that I heard the other day was like, if you run a post office at maximum efficiency, there's going to be one person who works there. You're not going to have any like staff to either help them or
Yep.
provide cover if they're off ill, right? So you have
Yep.
one member of staff. You're running at maximum efficiency there, and what have you got? You've got a line that's like out the door. Like, you're running at maximum efficiency. You could have like self-service machines, I guess, but like if you've got self-service machines and one of them breaks, you've got your one member of staff who can fix the self-service machines because we're maximizing efficiency. But
Yep.
he's the one, like, maximizing efficiency in government and in utilities and
Yep.
in things like healthcare services means essentially being understaffed and being underfunded. And I
Yep.
think this is just something we need to start rejecting now. We need to be going, no, actually, I want my healthcare to be a bit bloated. I want there to be enough, like, even if it means somebody's
Preach.
like standing around and hasn't got anything to do most of the day, like, I want that so that when I go to A&E with my child, there is somebody who's like
Yep.
able to see them within like half an hour,
100. I think the idea of rejecting the idea of just profitability, and this is what ties back into, like, every sector doesn't have to produce money. Every sector doesn't have to be efficiently run in terms of like making it so scrimp and agile. I think, especially when, like, again, when we talk about healthcare, people realize this is literally life and death. When you talk about profit in the context of health, what does that mean? These are the questions that I think are good. When you talk about profit in the context of health, it means, for example, in the United States, denying healthcare to people. This is a story, by the way, that I think is absolutely disgusting, and I think about it a lot since I read it last week. A doctor who works in a pediatric hospital, working with kids and all that kind of stuff, and he had one child he was looking after who was very sick with cancer. And obviously, when you have such a disease, sometimes you have to take a lot of anti-sick medication to stop yourself from throwing up, because obviously a lot of the medication makes you throw up, and it's just a horrible situation. This poor boy was 7 years old. Doctor requested from United Health to get some of this anti-sickness medication. They refused. They rejected it. And I just thought to myself that it's very easy to say this, killings are wrong and murder is wrong. Yeah, we know that killings are wrong. But what we don't see is the outrage when you have hundreds of thousands of people dying unnecessarily because their healthcare coverage isn't doing what it needs to do for them. It's not providing them the healthcare they need. So I think what you said there it really hit the nail on the head. We need to reject the idea that everything must be run for maximizing profitability. Not least because what we can see in terms of the climate can show us reasons why we need to hold off of that idea, and the idea of constant growth that Rachel Reeves and Starmer and his acolytes all preach about.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree. Yeah, I don't want a society that's run for maximum profit, maximum
Yeah.
efficiency. We need to start like challenging these ideas.
What do you mean? I've always wanted to live in a society where I gave all the maximum profit to BlackRock. What do you mean? I've always, it's been my dream. Absolutely, I'm joking.
Yeah, it's like a great society to live in. Yeah, I think as well. I really think it's an important point you brought up earlier. Like the number one cause of bankruptcy in the US is like medical debt,
That's right.
because it's just like totally inflexible. What's the term? There's no there's a term for it when there's no flexibility to the price, basically.
Oh,
And
right. Yeah.
yeah, and so because like
Like a fixed plan kind of thing.
well, yeah, it's there's no amount where you'll go, oh well, I don't need that. I can do without healthcare. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? There's no
Exactly.
amount of money that you will pay in order to
T-
yeah. There's no
in
max
elastic demand. Yeah.
inelastic. That was the term. Inelastic
That,
demand. That's
I
the term.
can't claim credit for that. Turn left. Put that in the chat.
Yes, yeah. That was the term I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah, inelastic demand,
Yeah.
which of course is how like the theory of a market. Of course, it's more complex than that, but the theory of a market system works. It's supposed to be based around elastic demand and the idea that you can actually choose to go elsewhere. You can choose to reject certain services. You can choose to go where it's cheaper. When of course it never does get cheaper.
Yeah.
But you can do that if you're talking about like laptops or something,
Yeah.
where you can make do without a laptop. But when you're talking about your healthcare, there's not really a basis for that.
Yeah.
You can't do
Exactly.
without it. You just
Exactly.
die.
Yeah, and this again, this is one of the. I'm a bit torn because on one hand, I'm excited about the uniting around this topic with conservatives, liberals, moderates, but I'm also a bit like, I kind of wish that this is like an opportunity for some deeper thinking. If you're, for example, you see like, I'm a conservative, and I agree that this, the healthcare companies are doing. I don't feel sympathy for the CEO, and I'm like, well, let's expand on that point a bit. Let's think about other areas where maybe we can try to
Yes.
drag people left. But yes,
Yes, I agree. It's a great opportunity. Like the opportunity we've been presented with here is a great opportunity as an inroad to win people over and to be like, no, actually, here's why you should be looking at the system more widely. I think the problem is that conservatives, although they agree that the real crime is the crime committed um, the healthcare companies and
yeah,
health insurance companies, I think they agree on that point. The problem is I don't think they're viewing that as a wider pattern of profiteering within our society and the problems that a system driven by profit can cause. And I think we're going to need to win them round on that. All
that's
right.
right.
Are you
I
happy to
think
move on to our next story, or are you
yeah, let's do it.
awesome? Okay, cool. Let's go on to our next story in that case. Do you ever wonder why the right wing aren't upfront with their migration statistics? Why are they always hiding the data? This week, the right wing burst a collective vein in their forehead when the Telegraph claimed that foreign criminals had committed 10,000 second offences without being deported.
Let's talk about those foreign criminals who don't get deported, even though I thought that was the law, that you got deported if you committed a crime in this country. You weren't a citizen of this country, but they are committing a whopping 10,000 offences in a single year. This is the latest Ministry of Justice data, revealing that a quarter of foreign criminals go on to re-offend in the UK after being released from jail while remaining in the country. Each of the 3,235 foreign offenders freed from jail accounted for 3 crimes on average, totalling more than 10,000 offences in the year to March 2022. That's the latest we've got the figures for. That's a rise of 25% on the previous year.
So, Julia Hartley-Brewer claimed that this data was taken from the Ministry of Justice. But when we looked at their latest published statistics, we couldn't find it. We then went to the Telegraph, but it was behind a paywall. So we tried the Express, GB News, Breitbart, but none of them seemed to provide the original source. Why might that be? Let's think about this. So here's a graph from the Daily Mail. The source shows that the reoffending rate of foreign criminals has actually fallen since 2019, despite a large increase in overall immigration. Of course, this is very inconvenient for their narrative about foreign criminals. However, there's also a bigger data flaw that's hidden from even the Daily Mail's recounting of this story. You see, this data was taken from a parliamentary question and answer session where Reform MP Rupert Lowe had requested the reoffending rate of foreign criminals for the last 5 years. He's been asking a lot of questions along these lines recently. Not that he has an agenda or anything when he's asking about foreign criminals. Obviously, I'm sure it's just a total coincidence. I'm sure he's concerned about a whole range of issues and hasn't just asked about 300, 400 questions about the same issue, immigration. So in response, Labour's Nicola Staken, since they're obligated to provide a response, released the data and said the proven reoffending rate for all adult offenders released from custody or starting a court order in the April 21st to March 22nd annual cohort was 32.5%. We refer all foreign national offenders in receipt of custodial sentence to the Home Office. Those sentenced to 12 months or more are automatically considered for deportation. So that's where Labour stands. The data revealed that the offending rate for these foreign criminals was 24%, which means they're significantly less likely than British nationals, on average, to reoffend. However, if you actually read the attached table, there's an interesting caveat that might explain why right-wingers are so keen to hide the data. Look at this. It says, nationality, it's note 2, nationality is based on self-declared single nationality. It does not take into account dual nationality. Therefore, individuals included within foreign nationals could also be British nationals. In other words, the data doesn't separate out dual nationals and foreign nationals, and it's entirely self-reported. So this data includes people who are British with dual nationality. If you are part Irish, like I am, and claim dual citizenship, and you steal a Mars bar, you're being included in this data if you reoffend. If you were born here, but one of your parents wasn't, and you have dual nationality, any crimes you commit could be included in this data, right? Are you a foreign criminal if you were born here? Well, according to this data set, according to Talk TV, according to the Daily Mail, according to the Express, GB News, yeah, you're a foreign criminal even if you were born here. Like, it's ridiculous. They've included dual nationals in the data concerning foreign criminals. They just haven't looked at it properly. No wonder they didn't want us having a closer look at it. But of course, that didn't stop Julia Hartley-Brewer and the Daily Mail painting a picture of scary people from Albania coming to terrorise your Britain through and through.
Let's talk about this with Tony Smith. He's the former head of the UK Border Force. Good afternoon to you. Hello, thanks so much for joining us. I mean, I think most people are just astounded that someone in this country, whether they've, originated, had leave to be in this country or were here illegally, if you commit a crime, well then, frankly, we throw you out, don't we? Wouldn't I would expect that to happen to me if I committed a crime in any other country, that I would be removed from the country after I'd served my time in prison. But we don't deport these people. Why don't we?
I think what's happened, Julia, is that a number of people that are in prison, foreign national offenders, they're recommended for deportation by the courts. They serve their sentence, and then when it gets close to early release date, EDR, they refer to the Home Office for deportation. That's when the applications start arriving on your desk. And this will be an application. This person cannot be actually deported. You can't do that because of a reason or another. The two main reasons are Article 8.
I was just say it's going to be Article 8, isn't it?
The Article 8, which is a right to family life, is that if you've been here for a while, whether it's legally or illegally, if you've struck up some kind of a family relationship, then that should arguably give you a right to stay in the country. Or Article 3, in that if you were to deport this person, then they would suffer inhuman or degrading treatment when they got back home again for one reason.
They should have thought of that before they committed the crime. I mean, we're not talking about parking tickets here. We're talking often about, but people who've, gone to jail. And as we know, unless maybe they've written a hurty tweet, they probably had to commit quite a lot of offences. And the fact they go on to commit, a number of offences afterwards suggests they're probably, persistent criminals. But even the Article 8 right to a family life, I've never understood. You have a right to a family life, that's fine. But you don't have a right to a family life when you're behind bars. So why don't we have an issue with separating families then? But also, you can continue your family life with your wife, girlfriend, mother, child, whatever it is, but you have to do it in your home country because we don't want you here anymore. Why on earth is that a contradiction?
Probably because a lot of the people you're talking about are British, Julia. Like, this is what happens when you make wild assumptions based off of bad data that you haven't looked at properly. But did you notice how they instantly turned it around to try to blame human rights, right? We know why this data set is so large now. It's because they're including British citizens in the data set. Like, it's not just foreign nationals, it's British citizens as well. So why are they turning it to human rights? Here's a bad data set which includes British nationals and calls them foreigners, and this number is so big because of those pesky human rights lawyers. Samuel, why are Talk TV so keen to turn this conversation into a conversation about human rights and why they're bad and causing us loads of problems? What do they gain?
Well, because they're fascists, right? Let's be real. I'm so tired of pussyfooting around these ghouls and terrible people. Whoops. Can you hear me? Okay, so I just got a thing. Yeah. I mean, just to repeat, because I'm not sure if we got the first part, but it's just saying that they are fascists. This is the reason why, not to pussyfoot. Oh, can you guys hear me now?
Oh, can people in the chat not hear you? I can hear you.
I just got a producer might saying that unmute. Okay.
I can hear you.
Yeah, I've just unmuted.
Am I audible? That's the question. Have I just been talking to nobody?
You can hear me, Cog, right?
I can hear you. Yes.
Okay. People saying they can hear us. Okay, cool. They're fascists, and this is what we're going to be dealing with, especially in 2025. I think as leftists on the left, we really need to have a conversation about how are we going to deal with the onslaught of just fake news. There was a time, maybe 3 to 4 years ago, where we maybe reached a peak of debating between the left and right. And it would be actually the impetus would be that you brought real facts to the debate. You couldn't just be like, nowadays, as we've seen, because of the rise of Trump and his re-election, I think that a lot of the right in this country will feel, well, why do we need to stick to the facts? What purpose does that serve? We've just seen this guy who said Haitian immigrants are eating cats and dogs, and he's got elected. So so you're telling me that dual nationality foreign, that's the starting point position that these people are starting with, because facts don't matter to them. It's all projection, it's all lies. And I think that, like we say, I think we on the left have to have a discussion in 2025 to note how we're going to deal with it, because people like Julia Hartley-Brewer are going to continue spewing the lies. People like Lawrence Fox, and another component of this, another reason why I feel that they feel they can do all these lies without being checked, is because of the prominence of X and Elon Musk, the richest man in the world, boosting these people. Yes, concerning, totally agree. Under each and every of these Nazi posts. So I think in 2025, we're going to see a lot. We're going to see that on steroid. We're going to see more and more of these lies. And I think that one of the things that I've been discussing with some friends and stuff, and really want to talk about next year, is that on the left, I feel the vacuum obviously is with Starmer. He's not on the left, and he's not advocating for our needs. But one of the things that the right does effectively is talk about immigrants, and they demonize immigrants over and over again. They've got their messaging locked in. And I was saying to a friend the other day, is it any surprise that we see reform surging? Where's the left narrative? What are we saying? When we talk, reform surging, no one can stop the surge, it's amazing. And it's like, well, are we surprised that these people are surging when you have a lack of rebuttals to all these? And look, people go on GB News and they might have a rebuttal from the left wing, but we don't necessarily have the same intensity. For example, imagine if the left, and I've tweeted about this, imagine if the left went as hard against billionaires as the right does against immigrants. I mean, would that not be justified? And I think more people are waking up, especially since the re-election of Donald Trump and the connection with how much Elon Musk and the top richest 20 families in America spent on that election. I think we're seeing the influence that billionaires have in our society is very corrosive. So I would much rather have a party and a platform of going after these like Bernie Sanders did, than going up against and saying that immigrants are the problem when they're not.
Yeah, I mean, you're so right. The calling out Keir Starmer, like, it needs to be done. Unfortunately, we didn't have to fight with people who are supposed to be kind of on the liberal left side. But at the moment,
Yep.
Keir Starmer's entire messaging is basically reform is correct about everything. Please vote for Labour instead. And it's like, can you not see how that will not lead to the
Yep.
things that you want? It really won't.
Cog, it's just. I'm so sorry to cut
Go
you off, but I just want to quickly say that that is so spot on, and it's really infuriating and worrying to me. You not least because we actually have information that part of Keir Starmer's team went to the States to help and consult with Kamala Harris on their on their elections. Let's see how that went. Yeah, I know, but it really does bother me. Like we saw with Joe Biden, the increased child tax credits that he put through, that came through when he first started his presidency. The moment that they went through it, when his approval ratings was hovering around 54-55%. It was really good for a while. The moment December, when the child tax credits started to wind down, for those of you who don't know, as part of his Build Back Better plan, Joe Biden initially increased the amount that parents get for their child in terms of like support and support allowance for living and stuff. Joe Biden wound that down around December, and his approval rating started to dip and dip and dip. And what we saw is that approval rating never recovered. And the reason why it never recovered is because he didn't fight for the progressive policies that he actually campaigned on. There were some rumblings of maybe a quarter of student debt, a cancellation here, or maybe another cancellation of student debt there, but it was never substantive. And this is what the point we're trying to connect with Keir Starmer is that we've just seen what happened in the States, like you said, Cog. We've seen the failure of establishment corporate Democrats to meet the moment and buck the anti-incumbency trend. We're going to see exactly the same thing times 10 if Labour doesn't get its act together. And honestly, the only way I see Labour as a vehicle for change is if Starmer is gone. Because what I think is that there are centrist Labour figures out there who are more amenable, right? They can be, maybe they're not going to be, Lenin, okay? But these people, they're more amenable to what the left has. And I just think back to what Starmer has done in terms of the purges of the left. It's a concentrated effort to say, I do not like you left-wing people, and I do not want to attach myself to your policy agenda. So if there's a way to get rid of him and before the next election with that, but outside of that, I don't know what could be done with Labour.
Yeah, I think Labour's a big liability at the moment.
Yes.
Yeah, I'd say in terms of how we fight back against this,
Yes.
I did a couple of sort of TikToks on this. I've sort of like summarized what I was saying. One of the major things is to understand that the right wing operates on vibes, right? They don't operate on statistics, facts, and but to be fair, that's not unique to the right wing. Lots of lefties gained their beliefs because somebody who they admired had the right vibes, and then they sort of adopted those beliefs as a result. It's just like more persuasive because you've got the kind of data to back it up, and when you do more reading, you kind of like tend to trend towards the left or liberal side. Even if you're not like a full leftist, you tend to be more liberal if you've done more reading on a subject because it's so much more like substantive. The thing is, the right is all vibes, right? Donald Trump, when he sent out his stimulus checks, in contrast to Joe Biden, he delayed having them sent out so that he could put his signature on them.
That's right.
So the left needs to start having big vibes when it comes to the things that the left are doing. Big vibes is going to be the aim of the game. It's going to be about the aesthetic. And one of the things that we're going to have to do is start mocking the right for whining about immigration. Like, we need to start actively mocking them when they bring out these bullshit statistics, going after them, because it's entertaining as well. And entertaining is useful because entertaining you can use to get people on board. And that's, I think, what we need to be doing.
Yeah, and Cog, I totally agree. And this is the frustration is, and people are mentioning this in the chat, that this is the problem. Starmer is not that guy. He's actively seeding ground to the right when it comes to immigration, just like Biden did with Kamala Harris. I was the chief prosecutor. I prosecuted transnational gangs at the border and all this stuff. we don't actually want you to be more right wing on the border. We want you to deliver for people. We want Medicare for all. We want a universal healthcare system. We want increased child tax credits. We want a system that people can rely on, so that when they have unemployment issues, they don't have to worry about how they're going to live. This is basic
Literally.
things literally in a social democracy. So, and just one last point is actually just a comment that someone made, and I've just been thinking about. Someone said it in the chat. I don't know who you are. I can't remember your name, but you said something about the context of Labour offering the NHS within the confines of the USSR being, the credible threat at that time, and trying to offer an alternative and compete with that kind of social deliverism for the people. And I think that's actually a very interesting concept that I've never really kind of thought about. That, like, are we entering an age where it's just that capitalism is just like, well, we are, aren't we? Where it's so in decay, there is no alternative vision, that everything just gets into capitalism, and hopefully this ship can be can be saved. But
we need somebody to put forward an alternative and be more creative with the thinking, because
yes,
we are headed to somewhere dark. But we should go on to our third and final story. But before we do, we're going to read and react to some of your comments. Firstly, though, I want to remind you that we are still all volunteers at Turn Left, and we are doing our best to produce content around our paid work. If we want to become a fully fledged media organisation, we need your help. Please like and share our content and help us out financially by going to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support, where you can make a one-off donation or give us a small donation each month to keep us going. We are now also on Blue Sky, the fast-growing social media network and alternative to Twitter. So do go and check us out on there. Check out our work on there. We're really looking forward to being able to push more content out on that particular platform. We're really enthusiastic about that platform. Let's take a look at these comments then. Thank you, Samuel. Let's go. Hopefully, our producer should pull them up. Cool. This is what happens when we forget that nationalism enables capitalism.
Yes.
Yes. But there's also a core contradiction there, which is always worth bringing up, which is capitalism, because it's about maximizing profits, wants the free movement of capital and labor, whereas nationalism is something that requires that companies kind of the countries kind of shut themselves off, and we identify more with people within our own communities, because of course nationalism was originally a anti-monarchist force. That's kind of where it came from. Michael Lee says, had to have an MRI recently. It was carried out in an NHS hospital by a private company. It's creeping in slowly, and can't believe Labour are acting like the Tories. Yeah,
I can. They told the moment he started expelling Labour members. The moment he got rid of Rebecca Long Bailey was the moment I knew that he was. I mean, even before that, but
yes, yeah. West Streeting has flirted with the Americanizing NHS funding, Americanizing NHS funding in The Spectator. That's a very good point, Jay. Well worth bringing up. I also think it's absolutely bizarre from somebody who, I don't want to use his previous the things he's been through against him, but I just can't understand how somebody who's suffered with cancer like West Streeting has, and I'm so glad that he recovered. I don't like him as a political person.
I didn't even know that. I didn't even know that.
Yeah, he's if I'm remembering correctly, he's suffered with cancer himself. So for somebody who's been through that treatment on the NHS to start turning to private companies and talking about Americanizing the NHS by bringing in private company and relying on private support, it's just man, you don't even understand the principles that saved you, really.
Yeah, it's a real shame. I mean, this is the first time I'm hearing about that, but I wish that he would really think about the implications of inviting private companies into our NHS. It's not going to end well.
Yeah, 100%. Simon Lee says public healthcare to the US elites is communism. Yeah, I know, and it's so painful. God.
How will the elite survive?
Some stranger in the chat says, called Lewis Aaron, says, according to the OECD, the average US citizen pays around 1% more in taxes effectively. So that's federal and states federal and state taxes, than the average UK taxpayer. Yet the UK gets universal healthcare. Like, yes, very good point, Lewis. Very good point. Yeah. Okay. Cool. That's a wrap on our comments for now. So we should probably go on to our final story of the evening. Shall we talk about some more stuff that Farage and the right wing are trying to hide from you? Bloomberg News released an article claiming that local branches of the Conservative Party and Reform are planning to work together for next year's local elections. Local branches of the Conservative Party and Reform UK have held talks about unofficial pacts ahead of local council elections next year, a bid to unite right-wing voters against Keir Starmer's governing Labour Party. The discussions have followed on the idea that Conservative associations could stand down candidates in some districts to give Reform, led by Brexit campaigner and Donald Trump supporter Nigel Farage, a better chance of defeating Labour, people familiar with the matter said. Reform would reciprocate in seats where the Tories stood a better chance, they said. A key thing about this story, though, is that the leaders are disapproving in public, potentially for fear of losing their core support base. The talks have taken place in several areas across the country, the people said on condition of anonymity, to discuss a plan that is not endorsed by party managers. Both the Conservative Party and Reform UK have officially said that they are opposed to any formal electoral pact. Still, Conservative leader Kemi Badenoch has rejected the idea of a formal pact with Reform. We should be defeating the ideas of Reform and every other party for that matter, she said during the Tory leadership contest in August. Reform UK's deputy leader Richard Tice also said Wednesday he opposed a national deal, dismissing the Tories in an interview with GB News as a soggy, left-leaning sort of establishment bunch. You'll have to excuse my reading for this evening. I'm reading as best I can, but my cold is really sort of making my head very foggy, so you'll have to excuse me if I'm tripping over my words a bit. I'm really interested in what ideas Badenoch thinks she'll be defeating from Reform, because that's kind of an area of interest to me. It seems that Tice and Badenoch are broadly ideologically agreed on most issues. There's more internal variation of views within Reform and within the Tories than there are between them, right? Badenoch is anti-LGBT, anti-immigration, opposed to education on racism and colonialism, obsessively pro-Israel. She's anti-woke, opposed to net zero and the idea of anthropogenic, and she's skeptical, about the idea of anthropogenic climate change. Every view of hers worth mentioning, like I've just listed, Richard Tice and Reform hold an almost identical view. What ideas is she hoping to defeat here? As far as I can tell, the views that she holds and the views that Reform holds are more or less the same. Samuel, what do you make of this stuff? Am I being too harsh on them? Are they less similar than I'm imagining?
No, I think you're right. I think they are very similar. I think, I was thinking about this the other day, how the first past the post system and the party system, of this country makes it so that you get increasingly radicalized right wing. That the party is becoming more and more and more and more right wing. And like you said, I don't see any difference between Reform and the Conservatives at the moment, just as anything that we would see that's different is aesthetic, right? When you have Kemi Badenoch, who is praising Donald Trump and is talking about how she likes him and wants to work with, and Nigel Farage is doing exact same. For me, they are one of the same, right? In a I don't know, more liberal world, a 2012 world, maybe I could imagine that maybe you would have Reform being maybe fans of Donald Trump, for example, and then maybe you'd have Kemi Badenoch, the Conservative leader at the time, would be more like, oh, we don't believe in climate change, but I think Donald Trump's a bit too far for us. We have our. But at the moment, you can just see them all merging together as one. So at the end of the day, I don't see any difference. I think that in the next election, you could possibly see some kind of coalition in terms of them linking up together. They say one thing now, obviously, but what they actually do when it comes to a chance at governing will be different.
Yeah, I was going to ask you what the long-term effects will be, and I think you've fairly answered that question, because like that is what's going to happen. You're
Yeah.
going to get this cumulatively radicalizing effect where we're going to push the spectrum right,
Yep.
especially when Labour's idea of winning over right-wing voters has the same core problem, right? That the Democrats had, and this is, it doesn't seem linked, but it's all to do with this push to the right from every political party. Like Labour might win votes from these parties with an authentic alternative, talking about billionaires,
Mhm.
and people that they actually like have like substantive reasons to be going after,
Mhm.
but they're not going to be persuaded by pretending to be like a softer version of Reform UK,
This is
right?
it. This is the it needs to be plastered everywhere. You cannot out Republican the Republicans. You can't out Tory the Tories. You can't out conservative the conservatives. Just like we wouldn't. And again, why do we always have to be the one ceding ground to them? It's funny how they don't come and I mean, I guess there was a time maybe in the Obama era, sort of like there was a bit of like a shifting where the conservatives at one point felt they actually might even have to be shying away from the immigration kind of rhetoric, but we've long passed that era. They are in their ground, and what are we doing? Just always responding. We need to have our own narrative. But like I said, it's not like the left doesn't know what we need to do. It's that at the moment the establishment has kneecapped us because of their deliberate purging of socialists and making sure that Labour was acceptable to the establishment. Then they were allowed to get in,
Yes,
as
yes.
is the case. Yeah.
Yes, I think like the Tories can sort of like create a version, because they've got that like ideological framework and they've got
Yep.
that right wing voter base. They
Yep.
can create a version of like Reform UK style
Yep.
politics that it's like when Aldi produces Norpac as an alternative to Lurpak,
Yep.
right? Everybody eats that
Yep.
up. But when Starmer tries to do the knockoff Aldi xenophobe thing,
Yeah.
it's like the I can't believe it's not butter, and Starmer's like, oh, I
I
can
control
believe
the
it's not butter,
experiment.
right? Yeah, it's like it's as opposed to the Norpac thing, it's the I can believe it's not butter
Yeah.
thing. It's like you're not fooling anyone, right?
This
It
this
doesn't
this
work.
actually tastes this actually tastes like margarine. Actually, I can tell this isn't butter.
Yeah, I can legitimately tell this is not
Yeah.
xenophobia. Like I'm voting for the party that are going to give me
Yeah.
the xenophobia that I want. And you've told
Yeah.
me, by the way, you've reinforced to me the problem was kind of immigrants all along.
Exactly.
Sorry, I feel like we've made this into a topic we talked about previously.
No, but it's
But
true, and just
yes.
very literally last point. It's just that
Mm,
one reason why the Tories are able to talk about immigration endlessly is because they've been given permission from their donors to do so. And uh, when we talk about billionaires and Keir Starmer talking about how we need to tax billionaires and going after them, he's not been given permission by them to go after them. So
mm.
that's also another dichotomy that we're facing, that the right, their donors unleashed, they can do whatever the fuck they want in terms of going after immigrants. Democrats and the so-called left, not really.
Yes, I think that's an interesting question, because when we're talking about bases and bases of support, of course, you've got this idea that Reform UK and the leadership of the Conservative Party and Reform UK, they of course publicly are like, oh no, we're not in coalition with each other. We don't want to. But is this because there's two potential things I'm open minded about, whether it could be that they want to hide that, they don't want to be associated with it because it could like be potentially damaging. They could lose some of their core support if
Yeah.
they're found to be in cahoots with the either the Conservatives or Reform. Um, but it could also be a sign, alternatively, it could be that they're like genuinely against it because of that same thing, because of that image, controlling the narrative. But does it potentially also show like the power of like localism, and how local
Mm,
radicalism, we're talking about council elections as well,
yep.
could be, more important going
I
forward
think
electorally?
I think so. I think you really hit the nail on the head. Going forward, this is going to be the new story. Apart from the reform surge that we see, another big thing is obviously we're going to see a bit of a surge for Greens, and I think that and Liberal Democrats for that matter as well. I think I'm sure you've been familiar with that article that came out the other day that said that Labour has more of a chance of losing seats to Liberals and Greens than it does to Reform. But I
Yeah.
think I think that what you're going to see is that in local elections you're going to see a lot of Labour losses, and if not Labour losses, massive swings away from Labour. And what the majority of Labour MPs start to do when it's clear that he's not who he's cracked up to be, then that remains to be seen. But I would hope that Labour MPs get a clue and quickly.
It might not seem on topic, but have you seen Game of Thrones? You watched Game of Thrones?
Dude, I was thinking about how much I really enjoyed that period of my life where I just literally season to season back to back. Go on.
This is like going to be hyper specific, but you remember there's a moment where Tywin and Joffrey have like a standoff at the small council meetings, right? Joffrey's a king. For those of you who don't watch Game of Thrones, Joffrey is a king, but
Child
Tywin
king, right?
is the cool mate. Yeah, the cool kind of king maker, right? Tywin is like the hand of the king. He's the king maker, right? Joffrey isn't the one in charge, and that's kind of the point of that whole thing, is like them realizing, oh, actually, despite Joffrey being the king, the guy who's the kingmaker, having power in this world isn't necessarily being the guy at the top.
That's right.
And with that in mind,
Trump and Musk.
yeah. But with that in mind, does Farage want to simply have influence over the Conservative Party, or does he want to lead or outstrip the Conservative Party? What do you think? Because it's an interesting question to kind of think about, right?
I think ultimately, right, he wants to obviously be prime minister, and he wants to outstrip them, right? He wants it because he's part of the Trump school. He's part of the Trump universe, Trump world. Me. But I also think he wants influence, and I think he'll do whatever he wants to get it. And you see evidence of this in 2019 when he stood down his Brexit party in all seats at Labour. Where the Conservatives were as well. So there is the idea that ultimately he is more loyal to the right, and it's close to where he wants to be. But ultimately, I think if he has a chance, he will take it, and he will ultimately want to be prime minister. But we can never let that happen. Never.
Yeah, let's oppose that, definitely. I think though it is worth trying to learn from Farage. The way that he's pressured the Conservative Party is exactly the way that the more left-wing parties, the Green Party in particular, needs to pressure the Labour Party. Say, hey, if you want us to stand down our candidates in these seats, you have to agree to publicly support gender-affirming care for trans people. You have to agree to publicly support that £35 billion that you said you were going to invest in a Green New Deal. If you don't follow through with that, we'll stand our candidates in there. I think we could learn a lot from that. I don't know.
Yeah, for sure.
But yes. Yeah, cool. Awesome. I think that's where we'll call it a day for today, because we've been going for just over an hour. Thank you to everyone who tuned in, and to Samuel for lending me his insights. I really appreciate it. I really enjoyed it. I'm hoping you'll come back on again and we can do this again. We have a show on Saturday at 7:30 p.m. It's a debrief show, so it'll be a little bit more relaxed and we'll be having a chat. So please do tune in for that. We'll be discussing Labour's transphobic policy to ban puberty blockers, most likely. We're in a time of political instability across the world, so we do appreciate your support. And again, please do give us a follow on Blue Sky. You can just search for Turn Left Media. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful evening. Good night.
Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn Left.